Hi there! Welcome back to this crazy genealogy ride. Last episode, we briefly discussed the Norns, elves, and the plausibility of a line begun by a chaos element named Hurricane. This time around, I thought we would dive into that elemental group known as the Vanir, or the Vanes. Now, if you are familiar with the Norse myth cycle and cosmology at all, then you will have heard of the Vanir. Named as a set of secondary fertility deities that supposedly were on the same level as the Aesir, we do not have a lot of specific information about them as a whole. 3 of the big Vanir names melded into the Aesir clan, and several more potentials are abstractly mentioned, but not really expounded upon. This leaves us a large area where we can play with the material, both what is said and unsaid, giving us space for an elemental group that should have had a much brighter prominence in the retellings of the myths. With that in mind, I have separated the Vanes into 4 different groups, for now. There could be more, but where that comes from, or who it would entail, might be information that is permanently lost to us. For now, I think these 4 are all we need to establish some good groundwork. Remember that we are thinking outside the box and reading between the lines as well as the lines directly. These are possibilities, not inherent facts. So do not come at me with your Edda thumping. I want you to expand the horizons of how we interpret, not stagnate with only the few written texts we have available. Mythology breathes. It doesn't choke. Regarding the Vanir, and again, because they're elemental, we're going to play into the whole Wiccan-themed world building. Not necessarily the whole north, south, east, west context, but the air, fire, earth, water, spirit context. We're using this template to help explain how the division I am using works. With me so far? Okay. Amongst the Vanir, I have identified 4 different possible lines that I can actively use for this project. And there may be a 5th, but I don't know specifically how to chart it. And that 5th is the fire element line. I'm open to suggestions on who may be the progenitor, along with all those that may fall underneath it. I don't currently have anyone that definitively fits at this time. And the earth line is a little shaky too. It requires a broader geographical perspective to appreciate. The first group under the Vanir falls in the air category, and this genealogical line begins with a being associated to atmosphere in his various names. I have made him the head as I could not find anyone earlier in the line within the existing texts. There are 3 different versions of his name I have found this far, and I'm going to mispronounce all of them, so bear with me. I'll try to spell them out for you to help you with your own research. There's Gevar, Gevarr, Nokvi, N-O with an umlaut, Kkvi, and Nepr, Nepr, sometimes referred to as Nef, Nef. Now, if you recognize any of these names, kudos to you. Gold star! The one that should ring the loudest bell is Nepr. Depending on which source, each of these names was used to reference Nanna's father. Thus why I have lumped them together as different names for the same entity. And for the purposes of this line, I'm going to use the name Gevar for the progenitor, as it is most closely linked to the idea of air or atmosphere. And honestly, it's just easier for me, so go with it. He is referenced as the warder of the atmosphere, and the captain, and warder of the ether that surrounds Earth's atmosphere. See why I label him as an air elemental? As I said, Gevar has a daughter named Nanna, Nanna. She marries one of the Aesir line, Baldur, Baldr, and has a son named Forseti, Forseti. There is no mention of Nanna's mother I could find, and no other children are specified to Gevar directly. But I do have a theory that he has at least one other child. And this is going to be your UPG warning. The connection I will build for this other child ties into a different Vanir line. And since that line crosses 2 streams, let's just go ahead and interrupt the air line and get this other one out of the way. This next line is Earth. Now, I did state earlier that I don't have a lot to back this up. Several of the genealogical groups begin with a male progenitor. and those that might start with a female have been lost or reassigned. And to keep this in terms that make sense, think of the Vanir lines as cousins of different relations. This will help to keep them separate while maintaining the overall Vanir connection. For the Earth line, we have to pull from Tacitus's Germania and use Nerthus as the Earth progenitress. Now, she may or may not be the beginning of the line, but we will start with her until any parentage that goes earlier is discovered. I know there will be naysayers who state she isn't Scandinavian, so shouldn't be linked to the Vanir. But where do you think the Norse came from? There is too much overlap in beliefs and various group migrations to discount any association whatsoever. So in my opinion, she belongs here. Now, when I refer to earth element, I'm not talking earth magic like the power of growing things, like seeds. Rather, this is that deep, dark, churning power of earth. You know what the earthworms dig through and turn into that dark soil that is several layers deep. It's that kind of power. The power that ensures all of the living biome can provide the fertile field above all of its nutrients that will eventually help that layer bloom. It's the fertilized roots of the earth, the system and groundwork that supports the world tree itself. We know that Nerthus has some connection to this power and magic through Tacitus's writings. She has her own island surrounded by moving waters and only comes out the one time per year to bless all the lands. She is so sacred that anyone that looks upon her face or body is offered as sacrifice. Pretty intense. Nerthus's genealogical line has a couple of children that tie her to a primary Vanir line of the water, which, as you will hear, are very well known. But I believe she is also crossing the stream, so to speak, back into the air element mentioned above. And here's where that strong UPG warning comes in. Nerthus and Gevar. And it is my opinion, I have it linked up on my whiteboard at least, that these two hooked up at some point and a child was created. Specifically, a girl child by the name of Gulveig. I would like to take a moment here to point out that the rules of relationships, sensually, did not follow the same rules as the Aesir or even mankind. You're going to have to set aside any preconceived notions and allow the connections to form without prejudice. You may have recognized the name Gulveig as the witch woman who visited the Aesir and was burned 3 times, an event that kicked off the Aesir-Vanir War. And some people, especially scholars, try to equate Gulveig and Freya as the same being, but I'm not of that camp. I truly feel they are 2 different women, albeit sisters, which is how they can have the similarities that others use to make them only one entity. And here are my reasons. Victor Rydberg ties Gevar to the Aesir-Vanir War. Whether he helps to start it or helps to lead the charge against it, I'm not exactly sure. But he is connected to that war. And why start the war unless you have a damn good reason? A reason such as a direct connection to the person attacked. A duty to avenge. And remember, the Vanir are more elemental. They're not a warrior clan. So think about it in more modern terms. Your child goes on a trip to visit new people in the hopes of making friends and sharing knowledge. She has special abilities causing those people to become suspicious and afraid. Instead of talking it out, they lash out and attack her. And this is really bad hospitality, by the way. You don't attack a guest in your hall. Ugh, bad juju. Your child survives things, but you are pissed. How dare those rude upstarts attack your child? It's time to teach them a lesson in manners. And thus, you have the start of a war. If Gevar is linked to the Aesir-Vanir War, then, in a small leap, he must have a connection to Gulveig. The strongest connection would be a child of some sort. Now, to tie in why I think Nerthus, Nerthus, when you anglicize it, is her mother. Gulveig, Gullveig, has pretty powerful magic. And because the Vanir do not attempt to limit their women by patriarchal constraints, she wants to meet the new Aesir and share her knowledge. Thus, her agency is respected to go traveling on what appears to be her own. She is not a weak female, though. Her power is tied to earth magic. Not pretty fields, not flowers, but that same deep, dark magic that Nerthus shares. Resurrection magic is definitively earth-based, regardless of what cosmology you research. For Gullveig, we see the intensity of her capabilities when she is tied up and burned by the Aesir. Again, really bad hospitality. WTF! She resurrects from this burning and does it all 3 times the Aesir kindle the pyre. Her magic is powerful, and an indication of how powerful is given by labeling her a favorite among witches. So here her dad goes to war to exact retribution for her treatment, and her mother has given her some pretty potent abilities from that earth power. Now we have the setup for her potential parentage. Gullveig, as far as I know, doesn't have any children listed in the source material. And please don't confuse her with Angrboda. Nanna, Gevar's other daughter, only has the one child, Forseti. Also under Gevar's domain are the Heiptr spirits, Heiptr. These are fierce wind spirits whose purpose is to chastise those that perform ill deeds during their time on Midgard. I don't know how accurate that is, but I wanted to include it. So now that we have established the air branch of the Vanir and part of the earth branch, we can go to Nerthus' other partner, whose connection is actually better established, and that's going to be Njord. Njord, N-J, O with an umlaut, R, Ev, that crazy D with the slash, is a sea god, which is where the water clan concept is going to come in. Of course, it won't be so cut and dried, but let's dive in anyway. Njord, much like Odin, would go a-wandering and apparently hooked up with quite a few women. One of these connections is to Nerthus. According to Tacitus, Njord and Nerthus get together and have 2 children, Freyr and Freya. Did you think I was going to ignore these 2 famous Vanes? I know of the argument that Nerthus is just the female cognate of Njord, but I cry bullshit. If you don't want to pull in Tacitus, then maybe referencing Lokisana would help. Loki makes an accusation against Njord about sleeping with his sister and does the same when it comes to Freya, Freyja. Njord's response was only that this wasn't a big deal with the Vanir. And remember, keep your modern-day conceptions out of this. I hope to dive into my theory about Vanic relationships at a later time. But for now, let me offer an opinion that will help you get through. Think the term sister used in this context is a lot more fluid. The types of bonds between various lines of the Vanir is organized differently than the Aesir, or even the Jotnar. I think the relationship may be more like cousins versus sister and brother. So let's just table that for the moment. These 2 intense individuals have kids, Freyr, F-R-E-Y-R, and Freya. Freyr and Freya are considered the Lord and Lady in Vanaheim, at least if you follow along the etymology of their names. They are an item in Vanaheim, so there's no sugarcoating that. But whether they had children prior to living with the Aesir, I don't know. There are no surviving names or stories that indicated offspring. However, they are both listed as fertility deities. My opinion is, of course, they'd have children, but since we don't have any surviving names in the lore to fall upon, we can't corroborate it definitively. Once Freyr and Freya join up with the Aesir, they marry others who have kids through those unions. Freyr with Gerda, G-E-R-Ev-A, a son named Fjolnir, F-J, O with an umlaut, L-N-I-R, and Freya with Oder, O with an accent, Ev-R. 2 daughters named Nos, H-N-O-S-S, and Gersemi, G-E-R-S-E-M-I. But we aren't done with Njord's kids yet, so time for another UPG alert. I will try to get back to my theories regarding Njord's other children with lore that kind of hints around it. It won't be exact, and you may have to stretch your understanding a little, but it does really work. At least it sets well with me as I'm reviewing it. Under Njord's lineage, I have two other sons listed, and by name, they would be Heimdallr, Heimdallr, and Other. I will attempt to go through why I think this happens. Other is referred to in the lore as a member of the Vanir, but listed amongst the Aesir. You may have noticed that his name is very similar to Odin. That happens a lot within the lore, and sometimes the names are interchangeable depending upon who is referenced. For example, Gevar's multitude of names. Odin supposedly has over 100 names himself. The tendency is to try and make names all fit around a couple of entities rather than recognize them as separate beings. And this works in some instances, but not all. If more of the original lore survived, we would have more concrete evidence one way or another, but sadly we don't. Other versus Odin is one of those instances where scholars and pagans try to make them two sides of the same person, but like Gullveig and Freya, I think there is a familial connection rather than the same being. And here's where it gets kind of interesting. So, reiterate UPG warning. Njord did go a-wandering in those early world-building times. I mean, what the heck else was there to do? He was a haughty Vanir god, and the ladies couldn't keep their hands off of him. My opinion is, in those wanderings, he came across Besla, the daughter of Ymir's line, also known as the mother of Odin. And these two, bow chicka chicka wow wow. And sometime later, a half-brother to Odin was born. Now, she already has two sons with connecting names, Vili and Ve, so maybe she thought to do the same with Odin and Other. This half-brother would have been raised with his mother's people and their ideologies, which would both explain why he and Odin would be connected and why he would follow the same mentality that the Aesir do in regards to marriage and romantic relationships in general. Other is listed as a husband to Freya in the Poetic Edda poem Voluspa and in the prose Edda books Gylfaginning and Skaldskaparmal. They have two daughters, Hnoss and Gersemi, and these two daughters, whose names mean treasure, are extraordinarily lovely girls who are adored by their parents and beloved by everyone around them. We have no surviving material that states whether these two girls have any children of their own, nor of their exploits. What we do have is that something happens between Other and Freya, who were very much in love, and Other disappears, and just goes away. Snorri would have you believe that it was because of Freya exercising her agency by traveling to see the dwarves and obtaining her own dang necklace her way. And if you are aware of the story at all, she did it by hooking up with some dwarves who repaid her by creating one fantastic piece of bling. I think Snorri's full of shit. Freya was a vain. They operated by different rules, and Other would have known who she was at the start of their relationship. I mean, per Lokesana, we know that the Aesir goddesses were sleeping around, so that shouldn't have been a big deal. Knowing Freya's nature, if Other truly loved and accepted her, it wouldn't have been something that caused him to just disappear completely. The idea that he would abandon the wife he passionately loved and two daughters he adored over a necklace is absurd. It had to have been something more. Pretty jewelry doesn't cause you to disappear. Even sleeping with dwarves wouldn't have been that big a deal, as he would have known it meant nothing to Freya emotionally. My theory is that once Other found out he had married his sister, having been raised by a group that frowns heavily on those types of relationships, it would have sent him into a tailspin. His world as he knew it would have collapsed. Yes, he was an Aesir through his mother, but he was a Vain through his father, thus upending his own sense of self if he didn't know it. Add to that epiphany the societal no-no of marrying his half-sister, regardless of his love, and it would have appalled him. So what to do? He had children by this union, and his love doesn't just end. This would constitute a reason to disappear. This would be incest according to the laws of the Aesir. And in my personal opinion, it would be the only legitimate reason why he would abandon his family and life without any word whatsoever, not because of some stinking gold necklace. And how could he not have known? Well, that is a podcast for another time. So, okay, let's move on to Heimdallr. Oh, Heimdallr. I'm going to go through part of this now and then finish the rest of it when we go through the Jotnar genealogy. So Heimdallr is listed as a Vanir only in a brief, innocuous phrase located within Thrymskvida. He is also listed elsewhere as a son of Odin, but honestly, they say everybody's a son of Odin, which makes me think that the term Allfather is a title instead of the actual biological truth. He's not their physical father. It's just a title the lore authors used, kind of like king or chief or jarl. Heimdallr's nature is what makes me believe he is a son of Njord rather than Odin. So follow me down this rabbit trail. We know that in the source material he has 9 mothers, but more accurately, he's born of 9 mothers who are sisters. There is a passage within the lore that lists 9 giant women by name that are considered his mothers. However, they are not sisters, rather a group of Jotnar women. My theory is that the 9 mothers or sisters are the 9 daughters of Aegir and Ran, sea goddesses. How is this possible when we have 9 names listed elsewhere? Well, the theory works if you remember that there are 2 ways within Scandinavian society that allow you to have a mother. There's the biological way, which makes perfect sense. It's whoever birthed you. But then there's fostering. In early Scandinavian society, fostering was as important, if not sometimes more important, than biological bonds. So here is the outline of my theory that would allow this to happen and make both the 9 waves and the 9 named Jotun women the mothers of Heimdall. Now we know that the only way that Heimdall could be born of 9 mothers, like 9 women physically giving birth to him, would be, 1, they each gave birth to a piece of him and then sewed them all up. But I would think such an extraordinary story would have been something Snorri would have preserved. Or 2, these women somehow were combined, shapes shifted, in order to give birth to a child so powerful, beautiful, amazing from all 9 of them at once. Who would have that ability? Well, the 9 daughters of Ran and Aegir come to mind. They are called the 9 waves, and their ability to shift into something that is physically connected. So think waves of the ocean as water connected, not separate things. And this would allow for the phenomenon to occur. So the 9 Jotun women named in the lore, they were Heimdallr's foster mothers. And in this manner, you could have both scenarios as truth without canceling each other out. And I will go over more of these ladies when we review the Jotnar lineage. And in the meantime, let's get back to Heimdall himself. We don't have any children listed for him. And please note, I'm not counting the Lay of Rig where he set order to mankind with his penis. For now, ignore that piece of lore. We're talking about gods and goddesses and their godlike lineage specifically. We have no surviving lore that states he was married or that he had children. And so thus ends the line of Heimdall. So why do I make him the son of Njord? Well, go back to where I mentioned he was of the Vanir, and UPG alert, in searching through the materials and the various attributes he exhibits, I feel making him a son of Njord is sensible. Njord is a sea god, but not the larger ocean. He is more along the lines of a god for the boundaries between sea and land. Think coastlines, fjords, that stretch of area where you are close enough to see the physical land if you were swimming. The deeper oceans belong to Ran. And this boundary connection is also present with Heimdall. He guards the Bifrost Bridge, a boundary. He is a fierce and powerful warrior. His brother Freyr is renowned as one of the greatest warriors. Heimdall can shapeshift. When fighting Loki to retrieve Freya's necklace, and his sister, mind you, he transforms into a seal, a creature that is primarily water but can interact with land as well. Njord does have a connection to fertility. Water fertilizes the soil, after all, covers boundaries, and is a fierce warrior in his own right. Remember the Aesir-Vanir War? While the 9 waves handle the water connection and shape-shifting capabilities, and all these traits that exist, it's in their offspring, Heimdall. Now, Victor Rydberg also makes an assumption, and I'll be honest, I don't agree with this at all. He states Heimdall has some kind of a fire god essence to him, probably through the connection to Bifrost. Rydberg tries to argue that Heimdall is the son of Farbati's line, using the theory that Odin's brother Vili and Lodur are the same as Farbati. He implies that Heimdall has that fire capability. But I think this is one of those areas where Rydberg is full of shit. It feels all wrong. I tried to entertain the notion for a little in order to understand where it might hold some water, but it honestly made me just want to vomit. Keeping him firmly under the Vanir makes the most sense. He exhibits even more Vonic qualities through his hearing traits. He can hear a blade of grass grow. He sacrificed hearing in one of his ears to the base of Yggdrasil to hear all things and be warned when Ragnarok was coming. He can see into all the realms. This is one of those things I truly believe that Marvel got right. And these are not Aesir traits, but Vanir. It stems from elemental type of magic, raw power that the Aesir, even Odin, do not possess. In light of all this, it would make sense that he would be a son of Njord. So with that, we can pretty much wrap up all we have when it comes to the children or grandchildren of Njord. Whew, moving along. In order to review the last tribal line of the Vanir I have on my chart, I need to preface something that conflicts with the lore itself. The line involving celestial beings is listed within various books and poems within both the poetic and prose Eddas, and it originates as an action governed by the Aesir. But this, in my opinion, is not correct. Odin does not have the power to create elemental beings, regardless of how much magic he gains. He might want to, but he can't. He is not connected to that elemental power line himself. So the idea of his forcing or punishing celestial entities to do what he wants due to some imagined affront is ludicrous. Having addressed that aspect, we can now move on to our next elemental category under the Vanir. Thus far, I've been able to single out air under Gevar, earth under Nerthus, and water under Njord. And logic would dictate that this last line must be fire, right? Nope. The last category falls under time and celestial beings, which links up to the concept of spirit. This would be the house of Mundilfari, Mundilfri. The story goes in Voluspa and Gylfaginning that Mundilfari named his son and daughter after the sun and the moon due to their beauty. Doing so angered the gods with his presumptuousness. But folks, the gods wouldn't have had any power over that, as I said before. This is an elemental magic, not the primordial type the Aesir and Njord possessed. Naming your kids after the sun and moon is not a big deal. Perhaps Snorri, or the original Voluspa author, were bringing in some of the classical assumptions within the Greek and Roman gods. They were always offended by mortals comparing their offspring to various goddesses. This was a formula he could use to keep the majority of power with his good guys, the Aesir. But this mindset doesn't exist for the Northern beliefs. As we see in this genealogical breakdown, there are multiple lineages that display a wide variety of capabilities. They didn't really have any one that was truly superior to the others. So let's get back to time. Mundilfari has several children who become responsible for the forward momentum of events in the timeline by establishing the movement of time itself. We don't know a lot about Mundilfari as an individual. Scholars have found it difficult to actually break down his name etymologically, but the closest anyone's really come to it that I found and agreed with is the concept of the mill of time. Have you ever heard the story of the Sampo? Short version of the story where I forget a lot of the little details like names. This was a mill that ground out salt when you said a magic word. The mill was a powerful object strongly desired because of its magical capabilities. It was very coveted. Salt was a precious commodity, highly sought after. So if you could obtain an object that created this food-preserving item, of course you would do anything to get it. So finally it was procured, and the individuals who obtained the mill learned the secret words to both start and stop it. But unfortunately, with the haste to start the process, they forgot the word to stop the mill. They were attacked on a boat or fought amongst themselves, depending upon the version, after starting it up. But in the fight that ensued, the mill ended up overboard. It was still churning out salt as it sank to the bottom of the sea. And those that had bought the mill couldn't turn it off without the forgotten magic word. This is the old explanation for why the ocean is salty. Roughly. And go look up the story, it's a really fun read. What's the Sampo got to do with the Vanir? Well, there's also a version where the mill turns out thyme rather than salt, and this ends up tied to Mundalfari. UPG warning. This is the reason why I like to view him more like a father time kind of figure, responsible for the movement of years, months, weeks, days, hours, and even seconds. I picture Mundalfari with a large hall in that celestial realm above the heavens. And in this hall dwell his children and their partners. It has doors on either end, one where the sun and the moon begin their respective duties, and one where they arrive at the end. A constant cycle where one leaves as the other arrives. Now, within this hall is a massive cavernous library that holds the annals of time, where everything observed by these beings is written down and preserved. And this is how I view his line. We have no remaining name for whomever was lady by his side. She has been forever lost, and I do not currently have an idea to even be able to recreate her. But from this union comes several offspring, two of whom are a son and a daughter named for the sun and the moon, Sunna and Mani, Sunna and Mani. Now, I know some people like to say that Sol, Sol, and Sunna are just interchangeable. But Sol is the actual physical sun itself, the embodiment of the sun, while Sunna is the caretaker of the sun. And that is how you separate those two out. Sunna was named for the sun, which makes it silly to say that she was the sun. Likewise, Mani is the caretaker of the moon, or Mond, M-O-N-D. And he is the one that takes care of that named body. Sol and Mond are the two sparks that Odin threw up in the heavens to light the way. As a quick note, I know there is a theory that Mani is another name for Nokvi and Neper, but I disagree. Mani's job is to carry and protect the essence of Mond. Nokvi is called the captain of the ship of heaven. The ship of heaven could be Mani and his chariot with Mond. If that is the case, then Nokvi is the one that watches over Mani's path, not Mani himself. Likewise, he would watch over the path that Sunna travels, as they supposedly follow one another along that same trail. Thus, you cannot equate him with Mani unless you equate him with Sunna, which makes absolutely no sense. So, no, they are not one and the same. And between these two children of Mundalfari, they carry the Norse cosmology through the cycles of time. I believe that Rydberg also tries to equate Nokvi with Mundalfari, but I don't think this works either. Nokvi is associated with the atmosphere, the heavens, while Mundalfari is connected to the concept of moving time, and that's not quite the same thing. To further my argument as to why it wouldn't be the Aesir responsible for these two journeys, Odin was descended of the primordial line, not elemental. He just doesn't have the oomph, the power to create such a huge cosmological standard. He may have thrown the sparks into the skies, but he couldn't do more than that. He is tied to the physical, while Mundalfari is tied to the metaphysical. Mundalfari creates the necessary movement through his two children to build days and nights, reckoning time into segments that could be documented. Sunna ends up married to a gentleman named Glenr or Gler, Glenr or Gl-R, and they have a daughter who upon Sunna's death will take her place in the chariot to move the sun forward. Yet another reason to say they aren't one and the same. We do not have a name for this daughter, just that she exists and is as beautiful as her mother. Glenr's name roughly translates to parting or opener of the clouds. And this sounds to me like qualities of the Air clan under Gevar, so genealogically I lump him under that line, even if I don't know his parentage. We have no other surviving lore for him, no other stories. Mani does not have any direct children listed either. However, Mani does adopt two children while they are drawing water from a well. Hyuki, H-J-U with an accent, K-I, and Bil, B-I-L. And they ride with him and the moon at night in his chariot. But they are not his biological children. They were humans taken up from Midgard. Dellingr, D-E-L-L-I-N-G-R, whose name means dawn, doesn't really have any parental lineage within the existing source material. But, in my opinion, he probably comes either directly from Mundalfari as his child, or he is of Mundalfari's line through someone else unnamed. I place him as a son of Mundulfari. Dalinger has a child with a Jotun woman by the name of Not, N-O with an accent, T-T, and their son's name is Dagr, D-A-G-R, or day. Dalinger meaning dawn and Dagr meaning day. Sounds like a perfect fit as part of the father time lineage, doesn't it? Dalinger's time is that delicate moment before the sun is fully up, all rosy-hued and hopeful. And UPG alert, this next part is entirely my opinion. There is nothing in the lore that backs this up. It's just me. We know that the cosmology likes things to be balanced, earth and air along with fire and water. We have day and night, light and dark, etc. So let's carry this out one step further. We have the sun and the moon, who are male and female, and we also have the dawn, which happens to be male. With this in mind, I would stand to reason that if they had an entity that was male for the dawn, they must have had a female entity for the dusk, or twilight, in order to keep that pattern of balance. And again, this is all my opinion. I ran with the idea, though, and ransacked through some of the words in Old Norse, Old Icelandic, and Old Norwegian, and feminized a word that loosely meant dusk, or skuma. Now, don't dismiss this out of hand. I realize that at the moment you are going, ooh, the woo is talking to you, kind of thing, and this isn't real. I'm not stating it as fact. I'm giving an option based on pattern concepts to fill in the gap logically. So you are free to use this, or you can ignore it, whatever floats your boat. But to me, her name, the name of the deity that would be assigned to the dusk, is Skuma. S-K-U with an accent, M-A. She doesn't have any children, obviously, since nothing was preserved about her. So to me, in my UPG opinion, it would make sense for her and Mani to be together. She stays at home, much like Dalinger does. Dalinger seems to be more of a maintenance kind of guy. He's the one that opens the doors so that everyone can go out. He makes sure that everything runs smoothly and on time with that whole cycle thing. But Skuma, in my opinion, opens the doors to receive the travelers as their journeys end. She would also be your librarian, archivist, or cataloger, the one who greets her relatives tied to day and then to night. She takes down the stories of their travels and puts them in the annals of time, which are held within Mundulfari's library. And that's why I place her as both the librarian of time and the goddess of the dusk. I don't know. It felt right for her. Staying home and taking down the stories. Now, a lot of the other women in the lore are very much entities of movement and change, very flashy. But Skuma to me is stationary, quiet, and kind. She likes her life as an introvert. So my picture of her is the slightly distracted librarian with nice big glasses and a frumpy hairdo, because physical appearance doesn't really matter to her, but quite lovely to talk to once you get her going. So this finalizes the setup for Mundulfari's line. With that, we have finally got through all of the various sections of the Vanir that I could find and logically placed, at least for now. I wasn't able to find any specific fire lines, making the whole Wiccan classification a bit lacking in that area, but I want you to know that there are a few other names that have a link to the Vanir. Those I am saving for when we review baseless line through the Aesir. Good gods. This mostly wraps up the Vanir and the various subsets. We have some extra ties to go over, but honestly, they will make more sense once I begin reviewing the Jötnar. I hope you had fun barreling down this trail and found all sorts of avenues to explore. And again, I'm not trying to tell you that this is the way that it is, but rather, wouldn't it be amazing if it could be? Read the source material, expand your mind and expectations beyond the norm. See what resonates with you. My lovely little heathens and heathen friendlies, have a wonderful week as we count down the days to Lunar New Year celebrations, Dieselblot, and Mardi Gras. Lasez la bon temps roulé. Remember your connection to the divine, and with all the chaos going on in the world, don't forget to find your sacred breath.